On a cold evening in February 1974, a 19-year-old college student was relaxing inside her apartment with her fiancé. Suddenly, the front door was kicked open and armed strangers rushed into the room. Minutes later, the young woman was forced into the trunk of a car and driven away into the dark night, leaving behind a scene of violent chaos. If you are the kind of person who likes drifting off to sleep while listening to dark and mysterious real-life stories like this one, please consider subscribing to the channel and turning on notifications. It really helps the channel grow and ensures you never miss a new story. But for now, let us get back to what happened that night. On the night of February 4, 1974, everything seemed peaceful in Berkeley, California. A 19-year-old student was sitting on the couch in her apartment. She lived there with her fiancé, a young man named Stephen Weed. Around 9 o'clock in the evening, there was a sudden knock at the front door. Stephen went to answer it. As soon as he opened the door, 3 people forced their way inside. 2 men and 1 woman were holding guns. Before Stephen could react, the intruders attacked him. They beat him severely, leaving him bleeding and unconscious on the floor. The intruders then grabbed the young woman. They tied her hands behind her back and put a cloth over her eyes so she could not see. They dragged her out of the apartment and stuffed her into the trunk of a waiting car. Neighbors heard the loud noises and screams, but by the time anyone looked outside, the car was already speeding away. When the police arrived at the apartment, they found a terrible scene. Blood was pooled on the floor where Stephen had been beaten. The apartment was turned upside down. But the most important clue was who had been taken. The 19-year-old girl was Patty Hearst. Patty was not just an ordinary college student. She was the granddaughter of William Randolph Hearst, one of the richest and most famous newspaper owners in American history. Her family held immense wealth and power. At first, investigators thought this was a simple kidnapping for money. They assumed the kidnappers would call within a few hours to demand a large ransom. That means a sum of money paid to free a captured person. However, days passed and no one called. The FBI joined the search, setting up command centers and tracking down every lead. But there was no sign of Patty and no demands had been made. Then, a strange package arrived at a local radio station. Inside was an audio tape recording. When the police played the tape, they heard a man speaking in a very formal, dramatic way. He said he represented a radical political group called the Symbioneseliberationarmy, or SLA. Investigators had barely heard of this group. In reality, the SLA was a tiny organization with only 11 or 12 members, led by an escaped prisoner named Donald D. Freeze. D. Freeze called himself General Field Marshal Cinque. The SLA claimed they were fighting a war against the American government and rich corporations. On the tape, the SLA made a very unusual demand. They did not ask for money to be given directly to them. Instead, they demanded that Patty's rich family buy millions of dollars worth of free food and distribute it to poor people across California. They called this food giveaway program People in Need. They warned that if the Hearst family did not fulfill this demand immediately, Patty would be killed. Patty's father, Randolph Hearst, wanted to save his daughter's life. He quickly organized the People in Need program and donated millions of dollars. Trucks loaded with bags of food arrived in poor neighborhoods. Thousands of people lined up in the streets to receive the free food. But the program quickly turned into chaos. Riots broke out at distribution sites as desperate crowds fought over food bags. Despite the food giveaway, the SLA did not release Patty. Weeks went by, and the public waited anxiously for news. Patty had now been missing for nearly 2 months. Investigators had no idea where she was being kept or if she was even still alive. On April 3, 1974, another tape recording arrived at the radio station. The police put the tape into a player, expecting to hear more political demands. Instead, they heard Patty's voice. Her voice sounded flat and strange. But what she said shocked the entire nation. Patty declared that she was no longer a hostage. She said she had chosen to join the Symbioneseliberationarmy voluntarily. She announced that she had rejected her rich family and her old life. She told the world that she had taken a new name, Tanya, named after a famous revolutionary activist. The public and the FBI did not know what to believe. Was Patty speaking under gunpoint? Was she forced to read a script to stay alive? Or had she actually changed her mind and joined her captors? 12 days later, on April 15, 1974, the answer seemed to come in the most shocking way possible. At 10:45 in the morning, 5 armed people walked into the Hibernia Bank in San Francisco. They carried heavy weapons and wore dark clothing. A black and white security camera captured the missing heiress standing in the middle of the bank floor holding a military rifle and shouting orders at terrified customers. During the robbery, 2 innocent people in the bank were shot and wounded. The robbers stole $10,692 and fled in a getaway car. When the police reviewed the bank's security footage, there was no doubt about what they saw. Patty Hearst was clearly visible on camera. She was holding a carbine rifle, pointing it at people, and giving direct orders to the hostages. The FBI immediately placed Patty Hearst on their topmost wanted list. She was no longer treated just as a missing victim. She was now wanted as an armed and dangerous criminal. A massive nationwide manhunt began. Police searched everywhere in California. A month later, on May 17, 1974, police in Los Angeles received a tip about a house on 54th Street. Members of the SLA were believed to be hiding inside. Hundreds of police officers surrounded the small residential house. They used loudspeakers to order the people inside to surrender. Instead, gunfire erupted from the house. A violent battle began in the middle of a quiet neighborhood. Police fired over 5,000 rounds of ammunition into the building. During the intense shootout, a fire broke out inside the house. The building was completely consumed by flames. 6 key members of the SLA died inside that house, including their leader, Donald DeFreeze, who shot himself before the flames reached him. Investigators searched the burnt remains, expecting to find Patty Hearst among the casualties. But her body was not there. Patty and 2 other SLA members, William Harris and Emily Harris, had not been in the house during the raid. They had been somewhere else in the city, watching the house burn on a television screen in a hotel room. Patty was now on the run with the surviving SLA members. They moved from city to city, hiding in safe houses and staying completely off the grid. On April 21, 1975, almost a year after the Los Angeles shootout, another bank was robbed. Armed members of the SLA stormed into the Crocker National Bank in Carmichael, California. During the robbery, a 42-year-old mother of 4 named Myrna Opsahl was inside the bank. She was depositing money collected by her local church. One of the SLA members fired a shotgun, killing Myrna Opsahl on the spot. The group stole the money and fled. Investigators later discovered that Patty Hearst was outside the bank during the murder, serving as the lookout and driving the getaway car. For months, The FBI seemed to be one step behind. But finally, on September 18, 1975, investigators got a break. They traced an SLA associate named Wendy Yoshimura to a small apartment in San Francisco. FBI agents and local police surrounded the apartment building and knocked down the door. Inside, they found Wendy Yoshimura and Patty Hearst. After more than 18 months on the run, Patty was finally in custody. When police took Patty to the station for booking, that means registering a suspect into police records, she was asked for her profession. Patty looked at the officer and calmly stated her occupation as urban guerrilla. That term means a soldier fighting a secretive political war inside a city. Now, let me walk you through what investigators eventually pieced together. After her arrest, doctors and psychiatrists spent hundreds of hours talking with Patty Hearst to understand how a 19-year-old college girl became a bank-robbing radical. The true story of what happened to her during those missing months was terrifying. When Patty was kidnapped on February 4, 1974, she was taken to a small apartment. Her captors shoved her into a tiny, dark closet. She was kept locked inside that closet for 57 to 59 straight days. She had a blindfold tied over her eyes the entire time, and her hands were bound. She was not allowed out to see the light, except to use the bathroom. While trapped in complete darkness, Patty was subjected to constant physical abuse, sexual assault, and severe mental torture. Members of the SLA took turns standing outside the closet door, screaming political ideology at her for hours. They told her that her family did not love her, that her father refused to pay for her release, and that the police would shoot her on sight if she ever tried to escape. Living in complete darkness and constant fear, Patty's mind began to break down. She developed severe medical issues, including a collapsed lung and extreme weight loss. Under continuous sensory deprivation and threat of death, she experienced what doctors call Stockholm Syndrome. This is a psychological condition where a kidnapped person starts to identify with and obey their captors as the unconscious way to stay alive. By the time the SLA took her out of the closet, Patty believed everything they told her. She believed that her old life was gone and that her only chance of surviving was to follow every order given by Donald D. Freeze. On January 15, 1976, Patty Hearst stood trial in San Francisco for the Hibernia bank robbery. Her famous defense lawyer, F. Lee Bailey, argued that Patty had been brainwashed and acted under extreme fear for her life. However, the prosecutor, James L. Browning Jr., argued that regardless of how her captivity began, Patty had plenty of opportunities to escape later on and chose to stay with the SLA. On March 20, 1976, the jury found Patty Hearst guilty of armed bank robbery. The judge sentenced her to 7 years in prison. Patty served 22 months in federal prison. On January 29, 1979, President Jimmy Carter commuted her sentence. That means he reduced her prison time, allowing her to be released early. Years later, on January 20, 2001, President Bill Clinton granted Patty Hearst a full presidential pardon, completely clearing her legal record. Donald DeFreeze and 5 other SLA members died in the 1974 Los Angeles shootout. The remaining members who survived were eventually caught years later and served prison sentences for their roles in the bank robberies and the murder of Myrna Opsahl. Patty Hearst went on to live a quiet life away from the public eye, raising a family and supporting charitable causes. Her case remains one of the most famous examples in history of how severe psychological control and trauma can completely change a human being. It leaves us with a quiet, lingering question. How far can a human mind be broken when placed under extreme fear, and where does survival end and choice begin? That is it for today's story. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed it, please check out the rest of the channel, because there are more stories like this one, with plenty more on the way. And if there is a topic you would like me to cover next time, or if you have any thoughts about tonight's story, feel free to leave them in the comments below. This was Sleep to Stories. Good night, and sleep well.